Welcome back to Engine Shop Joe. Tonight we're going to take a look at some faults related to the SCR system. In particular, our fault, and we'll look at the list of faults and go through them in a minute. But our fault that we were concerned about is that the system was reporting the SCR brick was moderately inefficient. We also had an active fault for the input lines. Input lines are the DEF hoses. So the system was telling us that the SCR brick wasn't doing its job and there was some kind of a problem with the DEF hoses. There was quite a few faults. Let's take a look at the fault snapshot. We'll talk about them quickly, and then I'm going to show you how we figured out what exactly was going on and solve the problem. So here we are at their list of faults. Now, one of the first things that I do is check to see if there's a calibration update in the calibration revision list that corrects the faults that we're really kind of going after. Here you've got 3712 and 3714 active. If you remember, those are just derates. The ECM has to tell you if it's derating the engine. Those are not the reason for the derates. Those are the cause of another problem. The derate is being caused by some other problem. If we look down, we'll see at the bottom, we'll see fault code 1682 is active. So that's one of the reasons that we've got that 3712 and 3714 active. Let's go to the top of the list. 3725, 6 counts, after treatment intake knock sensor. Well, we know from what we just learned last week that the knock sensors are what tells the ECM whether or not the SCR system is doing its job. And this happens to be abnormal rate of change. So that means that it's not reporting information when it should. Let's go to the far right and look at the timestamp. And the timestamp tells us when the fault first happened. So 3725 started 10 hours ago. Let's look at the derates. 3712, that started about 2 hours ago. And down at the bottom, 3714 was 3 hours ago. So 3725 didn't really have anything to do with our active derates. The next one down is 3712. The next one down, 3498. After treatment, diesel exhaust fluid tank level, moderately severely low. See, it drives a maintenance light. The operator at one time or another ran it close to out of def. And if you look over on the right again, it was at 126 hours ago. Not a problem. Next fault, 3497. Tank valid low, least severe. 476 hours ago. Not a problem. 1691. After treatment diesel exhaust catalyst efficiency, moderately severe. Well, they ran it out of DEF fluid. Look right above, 3497. So it ran low on DEF fluid, and that was probably the reason we had the 1691s. Let's go down to the next one. Crankcase pressure, valid but moderately high. Again, it was almost 500 hours ago. Not going to worry about it. 428. Fuel and water sensor indicator, 428 hours. Not going to worry about it. Doesn't apply to our problem. And so that leaves us with just 3 faults we're dealing with. 3712, 3714, those are derates. We forget about them. 1682. Let's go take a look at 1682 and see in the fault snapshot what that was. So we're going to take a look at the fault snapshots, and I took a look at 3712, and even though that's a derate, there's still a snapshot. And what a fault snapshot is, every fault code that Insight logs, it shows you a picture of every sensor reading that it was seeing at the moment that it logged the fault. So let's take a look down at after treatment diesel exhaust fluid pressure near the bottom. That should be about 132, and it's 1.5. Look up a couple lines to the after treatment diesel exhaust fluid dosing state, and that should say dosing. Instead it says priming. Pretty much the 3 states you'll see there are when you first key on, after you start up immediately, it'll say initializing. and that's the system waking up and everything, checking everything. And after that, it'll start to try to build fluid pressure in the DEF system, and that's when you see priming. And then after it builds pressure up to about 132 pounds, that will change to dosing. And it may not be actually injecting, but it's in the dosing state where it's got enough pressure to dose if it needs to. And then the next line down where it says closed, if you look to the left, it says after treatment diesel exhaust fluid valve commanded. That will change from closed to open when it's actually spraying fluid. Don't take that for a gospel, because some calibrations I've seen that never change and NOx comes down, so I know the valve is opening. Other ones it actually does read correctly. Other calibrations, once it says open, it never goes to close again, even though the system is probably opening and closing. So I'd take that one kind of with a grain of salt. But the third one down, the dosing state's very important. And of course, the fluid pressure is important. And if you look below fluid pressure, you'll see that our quality was 32.5. It was spot on. Once we install a new pump, we'll put the original lines back on, unless there's a reason to change them, the DEF lines. And we'll see if the unit will prime. You can run the manual override test in Insight. It's the after treatment diesel exhaust fluid pressure test. And that will just try to pressurize the system. If it can't build pressure, then we hook up a couple, or just a rubber hoses, push-on hoses like you see, into a pail of DEF, and run the pump, the same test, until we see fluid flowing out of the return. Once we see that, the air's out of the pump and the filter that's in the pump, and then we can hook the original lines up, and then we run a stationary regen. And in this case, our problems were solved. The faults all went inactive, we cleared them, and we were good to go. See you next time on Engine Shop Joe.